moments. But before we get started, just a few tips and tricks today. If you could just mute your mic when you're not speaking and use the chat feature if you do have a question. And we'll make sure that there's some time left over at the end of the panel discussion for you all to ask your questions. So I am going to stop sharing and discussion. So, and I don't know if you guys have a preference in the order that we in as we start asking questions, but we can change it up as we go if there's one that you're more excited about. But Jamie, maybe we can start with you on this one and then we'll go through the rest of the panel. What is your definition of self-care and how do you and your organization promote self-care?
Yes. So self-care is, it's such a broad topic. And so to be able to encapsulate it in one definition, it's very, very, very tricky to do. For me, it's just being aware that, you know, you have needs yourself. And I think a lot of people, especially in the non-profit sector and people we work with, like teachers and things like that, give all of themselves to others and very little to themselves. And that's, you know, it's very consistent with all the burnout you see in these fields as well. So to me, it's just recognizing that you need to be aware of your own needs and you need to attend to them. One of the things we like to talk about is being your own best friend. Quite often we have these expectations that other people will take care of us, you know, like that they need to be kind to me or they need to, or I won't be happy. It's like, no, we need to take care of ourselves. What do? We teach mindfulness, which we find is a really useful and helpful method of self-care. It's a way to give yourself some time and space. It's a way to be able to develop resilience, and it's a way to be able to be kinder to yourself and to those around you. So quite often when we're trying to give all of ourselves to others, there's not a whole lot of kindness in it. Because we're not being kind to ourselves first, there's almost like some sense of obligation about it, or some sense of quid pro quo in the back of our mind about it. And that just really doesn't work. So when we're kind to ourselves first, it's much easier to be kind to others and much easier to give all of ourselves to others because we have so much more of a reserve. And that's really what we're trying to do with mindfulness training, and the kind of mindfulness training we do is give people those tools to really take care of themselves so they can take care of others, essentially.
Thank you. Nicole or Kiala, you guys want to go next?
Jamie gave a wonderful answer. I agree 100% with everything that he said, and it's just really helping people learn to pause in their day and to check in with themselves and to slow down and to connect with conscious breathing and, you know, just to take that time for themselves. We're such in a go, go, go society. And a lot of times we need to create balance, and we think something that's going to create balance for us is continuing to stimulate, when it may, in fact, we need the opposite. You know, I think what imbalance does is just the tools of yoga. We're connecting to the breathing pattern right at the beginning of class. We're helping them move, you know, which is a very important for all. There's so many benefits of yoga that we could talk about and go into. And we're giving them a break from their device. You know, even if, you know, I've had a hard time with this because now, like I said at the beginning, we've done 2,000 Zoom classes. So they're still on a device. But hopefully while they're on that device with the online Zoom class, they're not checking emails, responding to text, you know, in the constant hamster wheel of their technology, and just to take a break and pause for themselves. Kay, do you have anything to add?
Yep, I do. I'd love to just say also that kind of think about it in my mind, like preserving and protecting your own time for yourself, and actually making time to do that, which can be hard and can be a miss if life is busy, you've got family and things to take care of, but actually kind of protecting those boundaries for your own self-care. And as far as imbalance, I was thinking about it in the dimensions of wellness. So more like in a physical sense of self-care, we promote movement for all bodies, all types of students, all levels, different accessibility for everybody. And then socially, we have a community that has close connections, and we cultivate community through our workshops, our classes, our training, and even on Zoom. We switched, maybe it was in earlier this year, we switched to meeting style from a webinar style. So the participants have an option to switch on their camera. And for those of them who enjoy being able to see and make that connection, I think that's really made a difference. They can catch up with the instructor. We can talk about how their day is going, and then we can actually see them move and practice. And then mentally, to be able to stay mentally healthy, we teach different things of the breathing and the conscious breathing, meditation, relaxing as a way to engage the brain in different ways that might not be offered throughout the day. And that's just a few things touching on the dimensions of wellness. But yes, I'm glad we're all here. And I think too, what Jamie was saying about resilience is really important too. It's building that resilience. I was reading somewhere that that's kind of the word of the year is resilience, and being able to sort of bounce back and turn things around in the face of something that might seem like, gaining the tools.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you like to go next?
Sure. And I'll keep it short because I think everybody had some really great feedback. What I will talk about a little bit is that we, coming from NRVCS, where we're a group of counselors and therapists that are working with the public, and often parts of the public that are probably most at risk for a lot of different things because of socioeconomic backgrounds and means and ability and their own health. What we've really had to do with our staff is collectively kind of wrap around with one another and help all of us to realize that not only is it, yes, our job and really our calling and our passion to take care of others, but it really is so important that in order to be able to do that effectively, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. The pandemic really has challenged individuals with having to take on a lot more responsibility and roles all at the same time that they might not have had before. Looking at especially like parents who have young children or school-age children and having to take on the teaching component as well as working full-time and then balancing household duties and how do you keep yourself safe and healthy and all of these other factors. So what we've really tried to do as an agency is provide lots of trainings and lots of opportunities for our staff via WebEx meetings, via Zoom meetings, to give them kind of that platform and opportunity to come together and offer some teaching on how do you take care of yourself and what are some things that you can do. And then also just give them an opportunity to talk about what have the challenges been that you've encountered? What are the things that are stressing you out? Are there difficulties balancing work and home and everything that's going on right now? And the biggest takeaway is to really remind everyone that self-care is all about intention. It's not about checking off a box. It's not about just kind of rushing through another task that you're trying to do. It's really about being intentional and being in tune with yourself and knowing what are those things that really do fill you up or bring you joy or bring you peace and relaxation, because it's very easy to go exercise and say, well, check, I did that. That's supposed to be healthy for me. That's great. But in reality, if it's not something that's done in a very intentional, mindful manner, it may actually be depleting you. It may not be filling you up. So really just reminding people to be in tune, to really know yourself, to know what those specific things are that help you to live your best life, because that looks very different for every person. And I think that's been our biggest takeaway.
That's a good point. Thanks, Rebecca. And I'm going to start with you on this next one because you kind of touched on it a little bit. So the next question is, how have you seen the pandemic change the thought process of self-care?
So I think it's changed it in several different ways. I think one of the things that became very apparent very quickly is the traditional ways that we were used to taking care of ourselves were gone. We didn't have the opportunity to maybe go out and have a drink, after work, or we didn't have the opportunity. We have some people that talked a lot about loving to go to the movies, and that was their thing that they would do to just kind of escape. And when everything shut down and really has continued to be shut down, all of a sudden, I can't go to the movies. I can't do these things that I used to do to take care of myself. So I think one thing that happened is people had to get really creative. Like, okay, so these typical coping strategies and coping mechanisms that I had in place are no longer there. And I'm also dealing with this very ambiguous, unknown thing. I don't know how long it's going to go. I don't have any control over it. And all of those things for us as humans are so difficult. And so I think, number one, we had to get more creative about how do I take care of myself. I think a lot of things that people were avoiding and a lot of maybe conflict or stressors that they were able to stay busy or distract themselves from, they were no longer able to do, because now you are literally being forced to be still. Like, you are in one place and you're not moving, and you are having to now confront both internally and externally things that are going on in your life that maybe before you could stay so busy doing, or contact other people, or be in community with others where you didn't necessarily have to address those things. So I think it's been really hard because those are not always easy realizations, and they can be really painful and they can be exhausting. But I also think to some degree, they can also be a blessing because it's allowed us to really see what works and what doesn't work in our worlds, both collectively and also individually. And so I think, I know for our agency specifically, if I'm going to focus on that, it really, we realized very quickly that to sustain as an agency and still provide good care for others, we did have to take a pause and say, okay, then how do we help our employees take care of themselves? Because this isn't going to work, and we're going to eventually collapse if we're not able to do these things.
Thank you. Nicole or Kiala, you guys want to go next? I'll just go backwards and forwards.
Sure, thank you. It depends on everyone as an individual. For those that loved the outdoors when it was warmer, the amount of people that got outside, I remember Jessica and I were talking about in the beginning, I just had a baby and I wanted to get a little bike seat for her to go on the back of my bike. Well, they were on back order for 3 months because more people were out in nature and taking advantage of the warm weather, and they had to be creative, and they weren't allowed, couldn't go to the gym or can do their normal workouts. So we saw a lot more family time, people enjoying the outdoors, whether that was walking, picking up running again, going on hikes, biking, etc. So that was really positive. Then when the weather got cold, that was taken away from them. And then they had to be creative again. And like Rebecca mentioned before, I mean, everybody's boundaries really shifted and changed. And for yoga, it's about being in the present moment. And we were in the present moment, which was really uncomfortable for a lot of people, of course. And so, what we took away from it is to be as creative as possible with our offerings. We had the online, we created on demand. So we would record those live classes so that someone could take them at their convenience, because everybody's schedules changed. You mentioned before with children and the caretaking and the moms and the homeschooling. So a class that they could normally do at lunchtime, they're not able to do anymore because that's now when school pickup is, or they're working at home with their children. So the on-demand was a way that they could take classes recorded. Now, what we found is someone that used to take an hour class now it's taking the class 30 minutes or less. And their workouts, and Kayla and I are part of the industry and have listened to a lot of their feedback and surveys that they've done, that people are working out 30 minutes or less now. So especially when it's online, so shorter workouts. I definitely noticed that was becoming a trend with the online. But the pandemic really showed us how important health and wellness is. Unfortunately, COVID really affected those with underlying conditions, and it brought health and wellness mentally, physically, emotionally to the forefront of taking care of ourselves. And just like Rebecca said, we have to take care of ourselves so we can take care of our families. Kay, did I miss some things?
Yeah, I think too, when I was listening to the responses so far, it's definitely been coming in a cycle or in phases. I think of the early period, and I got the goosebumps right now, because I was just thinking, like, what reminds me of the early period of COVID, and what did that feel like? And then what did summer feel like? And what did fall feel like? And this winter, and what now is feeling like? And it's almost like you reach a different level in the pandemic. And so you have to turn on and implement different strategies and tools that work for that level, per se. And I think that it's also important to think about the future and the thought process of self-care, because in the study that Nicole was mentioning, the industry was mentioning that it's going to be important to have specific classes that are more therapeutic toward those surviving and recovering from COVID, because they're going to have long-term benefits that aren't studied yet. So even thinking about that level of the pandemic, of when that process of self-care for those individuals, and then other people getting used to, when we're coming out of the pandemic, maybe not everybody's going to be able to fall back into what is that new normal. And so just thinking about that too, how it's all coming in these different cycles, and we're here in this point of it, but also how is it going to be prioritized in the future, and what will that look like in terms of different populations and their needs too.
Thank you. Jamie?
Yeah, these are some excellent points. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take a slightly different angle, and so talking about how the thought process of self-care has changed as a result of the pandemic. I think the response to that is, well, it has and it hasn't. So where it has changed, people have recognized that, have begun to recognize at least, that all these things that we do to try and keep us away from ourselves and our thoughts and all that discomfort, it's removed a whole bunch of those. So we've become much more aware of what's present here. And as I think several of you mentioned, and I think Nicole particularly highlighted, for a lot of us, that's really not comfortable when we're presented with ourselves. And I think a lot of the unrest that we've seen in the last year across the political spectrum can be put down to that. People really not wanting to deal with what's going on in here, so they externalize it and riot, essentially. Like that's the ultimate manifestation of it, of not coming to terms with what's present within. So I think a lot of people have become really present with that and become aware that they really need to get right with this. And I think a lot of other people, the majority of people, have struggled in one way or another. I think there's been a huge uptake of alcohol consumption, for instance, and probably drug abuse and substance abuse as well. Yeah, Rebecca's nodding; she would know. So, so I think all of these are symptoms of not changing your thought process around self-care and continuing to externalize your experience. When you begin to internalize your experience and internalize your relationship with the world and everything around you, then this time I think for a lot of people was incredibly rewarding. This past year has been incredibly rewarding because they've been able to go within and check what's going on. So yeah, so I think in the way it's changed thought process around it is that people have been made more aware of what really does trouble them and what they've been trying to avoid. And the way they've responded to that just indicates whether or not they've taken on that awareness or not.
Thanks, Jamie. And I'm going to stay with you on this one because I know you and I have talked a little bit about this, and Imbalance has talked a little bit about this too. But how have your services pivoted during the pandemic? I know you guys started a new program at Instill.
Yeah, well, we went entirely online over the course of the past year. We're actually about to start our first in-person programming in a couple of weeks. And so, yeah, we went entirely online. We were able to pivot really quickly. We're a small organization. And it was a good time of year for us too. So we do a big program with schools in the fall. So we had time to develop that for the online platform. Yeah, we went entirely online and we developed a program, we call it Embracing Change, which was aimed at these circumstances, you know, like at how to deal with these circumstances better. We provided a full online program relating to that and created an online community as well. And I think that's a really key thing that Nicole brought up. Or it might have been Carla, but having that community is really important of like-minded individuals. So being able to connect with people. So we've tried to create that as well, a place where people can participate together and discuss things that are meaningful to them. So they're the main things we've done. Tried to give people that opportunity to connect. We also have one of the main things that we've done right throughout and that we pivoted right away with is our Inspire meetings, which again is a community. It's an online community where you connect. There's actually a meeting going on right now. And we have, you know, small groups of people that get to know one another really well, and they discuss all sorts of things and all around the concept of mindfulness and the idea of mindfulness. But the discussions have been very broad, and we've covered everything you can imagine over the past year. So yeah, that's what we've done. We've just tried to create an environment for people that is conducive to more self-care, essentially.
And I know you guys at Imbalance, you said you've done 2,000 Zoom classes, so you guys pivoted online. Any other changes that you guys made during this time?
Yes. You know, I was talking to one of my best friends, and she lives down in Florida, just about everything, the state of the small business and what we were doing. And she said, Nicole, your community loves you and you're there to serve them and to help them. Just keep doing what you're doing. And we had stopped hosting, you know, one of our biggest things is service. You know, we're, you know, a social entrepreneurship business and give back to all these nonprofits. And during the pandemic, because we used to host those classes in person and people would come in and make their donations and we'd give 100% of the donations to that organization. And we had stopped doing that in the pandemic because for 2.5 months, we didn't have in-person classes and everything was online. And, you know, and like Jamie said, you know, we're really small. So we closed March 15th and had our first online class March 17th. So we missed 2 days and then we were up and running. And Kayala did a tremendous job of training all of our teachers and staff, but also we had to train the students, the clients, how to do everything. And so we added the service pieces back in and kept doing what we were doing and building that community and giving back and taking requests from our students who wanted to fundraise for different nonprofits and different organizations or areas that were a part of them. And that's what helps us build that community, the collaboration with other small businesses. We are having planned our second outdoor yoga event and having the Cabo Fish Taco truck come and the Like It or Not plant truck from Floyd, and Tea and Jam's going to provide tea. So to have safe but fun community outdoor events to get everybody together, socially distanced, wearing their mask, but to keep doing all of those things. We did the video on demand, and Kayla had a wonderful idea. She loves podcasts, and she was like, Zoom fatigue is real and people are tired of watching us online. So let's do some audio on demand. And I was like, great. So now we have some meditations, some different breathing techniques. I even have read some children's books, on our audio on demand. So that's my thoughts. Kayla, anything else?
Yeah, the outdoor classes, and even last summer, and then planning for the future in this summer, our students really love being out on the water for stand-up paddleboard. And even if they haven't never tried it, it's a great way to be socially distant and get outside and have that space away, but then also to be on the water, to be in a beautiful, serene setting, to be guided through all levels flow, and then have a floating meditation on the water. So I think I'm looking forward to offering more of those style as well. And Nicole had mentioned the pivoting to the audio on demand. And even we were thinking, or our plan in the future is to have some things like a walking meditation where folks can listen and be guided through a walking meditation, safely. And then I was just thinking about just an idea of like, maybe people are struggling with sleep. That's something that I've been struggling with during the pandemic. And so I was just thinking on here, Nicole, something like a sleeping meditation or like a wind down sort of thing. So all the ideas that we've come up with, it's definitely a fun way to bring creativity and to just try something. And then I'm just grateful that for Imbalance, any idea that we have, we're like, okay, here we go, ready to go. And that's what makes it a fun place to work, and to see the ideas come to life, and to visualize something and to be able to do it. And it lands with other people. And you might not imagine that in the beginning, and you're just thinking like, hey, I have this wild idea, but people will do it. They'll come and show up if it's distant and safe, and it's some sort of outlet. So I think pivoting has really been key for us. And we'll continue to do that as we move forward too.
And I had one more thought. Our privates have increased, the number of private yoga sessions that we're doing. And now that the weather's warmer, we had a mom yesterday buy 10 private classes for her and her daughter so that they could connect, because Wednesdays, the kids are out of school. So, every Wednesday, the mom and the daughter want to do yoga together outside, socially distanced with us. So that's something that we've been able to meet people's needs.
I love that. And Rebecca, I've heard you speak. You've been very generous with your time and spoken on a lot of panels for us. And a comment that you made on, I believe it was a First Steps parent session, is don't be afraid to seek help. There's all these great resources out there, but don't be afraid to seek help if you need it. So I think you might have a little bit different angle of how you guys pivoted services.
Yeah, it's actually been quite amazing because, when everything shut down, and like I said, the demographic that we work with tends to be more at risk in many, many different ways. And so that's something that we have to keep in our forefront, protecting them, also protecting ourselves. But what we found is that when we pivoted to doing, because we pretty immediately did the same thing, we of course are driven by a lot of other factors when it comes to funding and money and all of that. And so a lot of our guide, as far as what we're able to do and get reimbursement for and provide services with, comes from the state. And they were wonderful to very quickly shift and make accommodations so that any kind of web-based therapy would be, covered by Medicaid or any of those types of insurance plans. So what was really amazing to see is that our participation rate with clients actually went up. and we had much better attendance for everything from psychiatry all the way through to substance use counseling, all the way to individual counseling sessions, because you cut out that piece of needing transportation to get somewhere. And oftentimes, I think in the mental health world, there's a couple different factors that come into play. I think shame and embarrassment and all of these other different emotions that sort of surround wellness and, oh, I can't take care of myself, can be very, we call them like therapy interfering behaviors. So they can really induce sort of the spiral of people avoiding therapy or their mental health or taking care of themselves. And also transportation, like literally just having the means to get where you need to go and the money to have the gas to get in the car to get where you need to go is often a barrier for a lot of the folks that we work with. So literally being able to turn on a device that most people have access to and have access to a therapist or a doctor or somebody else or a peer to have that connection and to really have that service be provided has helped tenfold. And so we're really actually hoping, we were talking about future talk. We were really actually hoping that we can continue some of that in the future, because I think that will be really helpful to keeping some of these barriers that we have seen sort of dissolve, stay in place. And then the other thing is, as we mentioned before, a lot of this went in stages. So it was complete shutdown and then very slowly integration with things reopening and having people come back into clinics. And a big thing is we also provide services within the school systems. And so it was a really big challenge, but also kind of exciting to be with the schools and sort of partner hand in hand and saying, well, we're coming back at the same time with you, and we will be there to support the children. We will be there to support the staff, because a lot of times, even though they're not our clients, we are there to listen and hear about what's happening and work with them and in partnership with the children that are there. So as things have opened back up, we've had people going right back into clinics. We've had people going right back into schools. And I think that's where that self-care piece came in. And myself and a couple other members of our trauma training team went to specific demographics within our agency and really held some trainings and gave them a space to be heard about what are their concerns, what are their fears, what are the things and that they're nervous about as they kind of step into this unknown, and give them a platform to kind of speak and do some problem solving. And then we've incrementally come back together as a team and a group to say what's worked really well, what's been really disastrous, and how can we sort of help navigate these times with one another and figure all of that out. So I think it's been a really cool journey. And we've really seen how we can be very, very adaptive, even under some of the most difficult of circumstances, but also that those adaptations have actually been quite fruitful in a way that we didn't necessarily or ever have the opportunity to know that they could be. So I think that yes, the pandemic's been very unfortunate. There's been a lot of really difficult things, but we've also learned a lot of really beautiful, cool benefits that have come from it that we never would have been able to do before.
I agree. And this next question is really geared towards you, Rebecca, as well. And I think pre-pandemic, when the term self-care was thrown out there, I don't think that mental health was often, kind of included in that. But I feel like that since the pandemic has happened, media has really brought light to mental health and being a part of self-care and awareness. And why do you think that is now that the pandemic has happened, that there's such this awareness around mental health?
I think you bring up a really interesting point that for a long time, mental health was something that, not that we didn't know that it didn't exist, but I think it was something that once again, we could kind of overlook and sort of push to the wayside, distract ourselves with. I think what's been really wonderful is that over the past several years, there's been much more of a highlight on mental health and taking care of ourselves and addressing and honoring that part of ourselves. But I think what happened is with the pandemic, just like Jamie mentioned before, there was this knowing that there would be this uptick in alcohol use and substance use. for coping strategies, because people would revert to things that they had access to and maybe could help numb or distract or take away from the pain that they were experiencing. Well, with that comes mental health. They all go hand in hand. And so I think what the pandemic did is that not only was it a health crisis of our physical beings, but also because we know that mental health and physical health are so integrated, and our lives had really changed and been upturned in a very dramatic way, we knew that we were going to see this dramatic pandemic in and of itself with mental health. And so I think because of that, and because of the impact that mental health can have on people's functioning and society as a whole, that it almost forced the spotlight to sort of turn and pivot to be more focused on mental health. It wasn't something that could be ignored to the extent that it was ignored before. And I think a lot of that also came out with the social issues that we have going on in our country. Everything sort of has come to a head that people could look the other way and not be involved or choose to be distracted. But that's not an option anymore.
Do anybody else want to take a stab at that one? Jamie or Nicole or Kiala?
Again, everything Rebecca said, I mean, I think, you know, as far as your nervous system, you have your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic is there for the job of that fight or flight. And you, for example, you put your hand on the stove and you burn yourself, and, you know, for you to pull your hand back. But we're living in so much stress right now, and the go, and the stress that a lot of individuals are living and operating continuously now in their sympathetic nervous system. And it's just becoming more and more aware and prevalent. And with Kayla and I were talking the other day about the isolation, not as much connection physically in person, the community, you know, everything that we've been talking about in today's session is just everything is it's like that pot, and it's all boiling over, a pressure cooker, and it's you know, it's not balanced. So, you know, just the more that we can help people get out of this fight or flight response and more of a repair and rest and digest would be beneficial.
I think I addressed this earlier, and I think Rebecca did a beautiful job of addressing it too. I want to respond to Nicole's the comment she made about the go thing, because I think we were already in a pandemic of busyness. I don't think that's anything new, and it's such an integral part of our culture. The amount of times we've all been congratulated for being busy is ridiculous, right? And it is not a good coping strategy. It is a coping strategy. I think I really want to make that clear. Being busy is one thing we do to avoid experiencing what we're going through. It's a really good strategy for doing that, and it's quite dysfunctional. And as a recovering busy person, and who keeps falling off the wagon with it, I want to say that, like, it's really, when we talk about self-care, this is such an important factor. Notice how much we're being busy and why, because quite often there's no real good reason for it. Well, there's a really good reason for it, but we're not acknowledging that really good reason. So I think that's a really important thing to recognize.
I agree. And Jamie, I'll start with you on this one. What are some questions that we can ask ourselves to see, you know, where do I stand? What are some things I should do to, you know, be more aware of my mental health and my self-care? Just a few things like a self-check, if you will, of how we can evaluate ourselves.
Thank you. Yeah, I was practicing this morning, and this came up. I was looking at the questions last night, and this is the one that really sat with me this morning as I was practicing. I think the most clear indication that we can have that we really need to give ourselves a little bit more of ourselves is when our experience becomes really narrow. When we really find ourselves caught in our heads and there's just like, it's just me, this is it. And, you know, it's a really good indicator. When we're giving ourselves the care we need and when we're giving ourselves the space and the time we need, there is a spaciousness about it, about that experience. And we've all experienced that. You go to the beach or you go out, you know, go out for a hike or whatever, and you experience that kind of expansiveness where it's not just you, where there's a whole experience happening. That's the experience. We don't need the beach for that. We don't need the woods for that. They're great, like go there for sure. But this is an experience that we can live in if we're giving ourselves the attention we need and the care we need. So I think the more narrow our experience is, the more of a sign that is we need to address that. I think that's probably the key factor that I can think of anyway. Thank you.
That's a good point. Nicole and Kiala?
Yeah, we've mentioned some of these, but you know, how are, you know, your emotional state, your fulfilled feelings versus your unfulfilled feelings, and a check-in with that, your energy level and checking in with that. How is your sleep? Kayla mentioned that. How is your digestion? You know, how, you know, like Jamie said, you know, that spaciousness, is it all about what you're going through, or that connection and compassion and empathy for others, and knowing that we're all going through this together? You know, just a lot of those questions, you know, just to slow down and ask yourself. Okay.
Yep. And then back to, you know, the dimensions of wellness, like the sleep. Are you fueling your body? Are you getting enough movement? And what does movement look like for you? It doesn't have to be something really extraneous. It could be simple, you know, the 6 movements of the spine and moving your joints in their range of motion. Are you making time to do activities that mentally stimulate you? Proactive things to help you stay healthy? Are you learning things? Are you asking other people about their experience and feeling compassion and empathy and being a good listener? And also, do you have healthy ways to process your emotions, and what does that look like for you?
Rebecca?
Sure. I think there's 2 things that I was thinking about. And I love how parallel the counseling world and the yoga world kind of run together. But I think some things that we have really worked with our own staff and ourselves on is I kind of think of it as like a scan in a sense. So sort of that body scan of like starting at your head, going to your feet, and really being in tune with the physical and also the emotional piece of things, and really taking stock and inventory of where you're at. And what we introduce to our staff, because it's really, it's sort of the irony of the job, is that although we're great at teaching, sometimes we're not great at doing. And so we have to really remind people that we have to be modeling this for our loved ones, for our children, for our partners, also for the people that we work with. So having that self-awareness. And what we talk about a lot is that if you're not cognitively in tune with how you're doing, your body's going to give you signals. And eventually you're going to get to the point that if you continue to ignore and you continue to ignore, your body will break you down until you have to stop. And so we talk a lot about things like digestion and IBS and stomach issues, because there's really interesting phenomenons. When we get really highly stressed, our upper digestive tract slows down, our lower digestive tract speeds up, and boom, you have IBS. So, it's really looking at, do you have muscle tension in certain places? Are you having chronic headaches? Are you having jaw pain? Are you noticing tics that are starting to happen? because maybe you're thinking you're okay, but all of a sudden your body is sending you these signals of saying like, help, we need some attention, we need something different. And then we also encourage a couple things for staff to do is number one, to create a self-care plan. Like, what does that look like for you? And you can be very creative with it. You can make it into a very artistic thing where you have drawings and pictures of different things that bring you peace, bring you joy. And we talk about hitting all the different senses like sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch, and different things that are very unique to you that bring you those moments of peace. The second thing that we also really encourage, and we do this a lot with our clients, and I like to remind people that what I'm about to introduce is not necessarily it's not just because it's something that is so extreme that you're going to be hospitalized or something major is going to happen. But we talk about creating a crisis plan, because there's also there's different levels that we all encounter our emotions with. And oftentimes, if we haven't really been addressing ourselves, you'll have that one little thing that happens that just sort of breaks everything. And all of a sudden we find ourselves really spiraling in these intense emotions and sort of falling apart. And so that's a very different type of breakdown, if you will, than just your typical, I'm run down and I need some self-care. And oftentimes when we're in that place, because the way our brains work, and when we hit those times of crisis, the upper brain that's in charge of all of those cognitive functions and problem solving, and much more higher level functioning, it goes out the window. And so we go into that lower brain where it's fight, flight, or freeze, and we start acting in ways that might look bizarre, right? That maybe we don't recognize, our family doesn't recognize. And it's because we hit our limit and we don't know how else to cope. So if you have a crisis plan that's sort of set out for you ahead of time, there's no thinking involved. You look at it, or someone else can look at it and say, hey, why don't we go do this? Or why don't we put on this song? Or why don't we take 5? Or you know who your people are that you can call and connect with, to say, hey, I'm having a really tough day and I just needed to reach out and talk to somebody. And so I think that's a secondary component that's really helpful to have on hand, so that, you know, if you hit that time of crisis where you just sort of feel like you're melting down and you're not able to sort of take that pause or really kind of come up with strategies for yourself in the moment, you already have it outlined for yourself. You know what works, you know the people you have at your dispense, you know your support people, and you're able to engage in that and take care of yourself and love yourself through that moment, and know that it's okay and you're going to come out on the other end.
Thanks, Rebecca. And you kind of answered this question already, but the last question that I had was, if there was one suggestion that you could make for people to do daily to be better in tune with themselves, what would that be? Or just one tip that you would give?
And that's so hard.
I know.
Maybe we'll all have a different one, and then we'll have 4 tips. No, but I think I'm giving 2 because I couldn't not give 2, because I know for me it rings very true. I'm a very fast-paced person as well. So slowing down is 1, and self-compassion is huge. And really watching those kind of inner gremlins, how we talk to ourselves. And the clients that I work with, I kind of coach it in the sense of talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend, or that you would talk to your closest family member, or that you would talk to your child. And if there's certain things that you're saying or criticizing yourself with, and you're saying it in a manner that if I asked you to say that to your child, or I asked you to say that to your best friend, and you're horrified, like I would never do that, then that should not be coming out at yourself either, because we don't function well when we're coming from a place of criticism and really tearing ourselves down. So those would be my 2 things.
Thank you. Nicole?
It goes back to what Jamie said at the very first question with awareness and that conscious breathing. Breathing's involuntary process for the body, but when we're conscious with our breath and aware of our breath, and then for me, it's a gratitude. Every day, you can call it a gratitude meditation, but I sit and I think about everything that I'm grateful for. And that really helps me too.
I think the breathing would be number one in my head, is just to take that moment, because it has that slow down, the connect to yourself, to listen to your body, it has all of those kind of in one conscious moment. So it just brings you right there and brings it to the forefront of your mind. And so that would be my number one as well.
So what you're saying is every time my watch is telling me to breathe, I need to listen to it.
Yes. Oh, the iPhone watch does that.
Yes.
Mhm.
Jamie?
Yeah, yes, all of these. The goal is, I think, to give ourselves space and time. And so by checking in with our breath, that's one way to do that, because there's a rhythm about that, a nice, even, steady, slow rhythm that does not match how we often spend our days. So checking in with that and just coming back to that is great. The breath we love the breath because it's always there, right? It's something you can always turn to. So that makes it a great tool. But anything that can take your attention away from the thing that's causing stress, and you can put your attention into something that does not cause you stress, whether it's just looking out the window, whether it's listening to the birds, whether it's smelling the aroma of the coffee or the baked goods or whatever it is. It's just watching the clouds. Clouds are beautiful. They're amazing. And then you never see them in the same way again. So whatever it is, finding just that moment whenever you can, just to stop and take it in, to bring yourself back to the present. When we're like not taking care of ourselves, and when we're really busy or whatever we're doing, we're not here. We're busy usually thinking about the future and what needs to be done, and go, do, right? Busy. As one of our teachers loves to say, Rebecca, you'd know him, Joe Klein, we're human beings, not human doings, right? So it's really important to just be as often as you can, just to remind yourself. Well, if you've got that watch that reminds you to breathe, you could change that to be. Breathing is a great way to be, and there are so many others as well. So anyway, just to stop and be here for this moment is a great way to check in. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are all great tips. I think this was great. Does anybody have any questions for the panelists real quick before we wrap things up? Well, thank you guys. This was really informative. We really appreciate you guys being here and doing this for us. This is going to be recorded and placed on our website. So if anybody missed it, then they can catch up with us later. I have just a few quick announcements here. Like I said, this call is going to be posted on our website. Our next call is on April 15th. And it's going to be on diversity, equity, and inclusion for the nonprofit sector. And if you are participating in Give Local NRV, our next training is on April the 20th at 2 p.m. And you can register for that on our Give Local NRV website. And we hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful to hear everyone's perspective, and really appreciate the opportunity, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you all so much for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye
thanks
all.
for bringing us together. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.